All right, so this one I'm going to show you how I wind up doing breadboard ends on these Greene Greene inspired sort of tables, or any sort of Greene Greene inspired furniture that has a breadboard end. So I make a nightstand this way. The armoire behind me also have breadboard ends. So there's again, I think I showed this one time before, but that's the armoire, and I've got the breadboard end just kind of loosely pushed in there. But let me show you how I go about doing these. So this is a hall table, and I think we've seen a couple parts of this. I'll do a few more demos on this, including how to, it's kind of hard to see, but how to do that sort of leg indent down there. So that's an interesting detail, typical for Greene Greene furniture, particularly I think the Blacker House furniture. But anyhow, so years ago, so the Greene Greene breadboard ends are done a little differently. Typically, what you can do with a breadboard end, you would cut a stub tenon. It can come all the way through the breadboard end or the table, or you can have it blind so you don't see it. Typically, they'll have a couple of the longer pieces of tenon. The shorter stub tenon will be in the middle, and then we can peg it. Greene Greene breadboard ends are done a little differently, so we're trying to do this in sort of in keeping with the way the Hall brothers actually implemented the breadboard ends. You know, Greene Greene were the designers, the architects. John and Gary Hall were actually the craftsmen who implemented most of those pieces of furniture. So the way they typically did it is we cut a slot in here, corresponding slot in the breadboard end. And then I mill these sort of loose splines. They'll be pressed in there and glued in. I'm just going to put it in there for now. So I did these with a wing cutter on my router table. Let me grab that bit real quick so you have an idea what I'm talking about. So I forget where I got these bits, but essentially what I got, this is the wing cutter. I have a couple different types of bearings that'll go on the top. Basically 3 wing carbide inserts. I think this one's 1/4 inch. The rest of the bit will have a series of wing cutters. I've got a couple different bearings that go on the top. Typically the way it's set up right now, it cuts a 1/2 inch deep slot. So from the tip here to the bearing is a 1/2 inch. So I'll cut a 1/2 inch slot in the table top, and then a 1/2 inch slot in deep slot in the breadboard end. So that's how I got the slot in there. So let's talk about this real quick. So the spline needs to be, the grain needs to be running in the same direction as the top. I'm going to glue it into the top, and I'll glue it the first 3 inches into the breadboard end. The rest of this mechanism here, it has to slide because our top's going to expand and contract in response to, environmental changes. The breadboard end is running perpendicular to the grain on that, so it's not going to expand in the same direction. If I glue this all the way in, I'm going to have some problems with breaking it. So, loose spline, we'll lock it in there, and typically what I do with the Greene Greene breadboard ends, the breadboard ends are about 1/8 of an inch wider than the top on both ends, so 1/4 inch overall. So let me bring this down here. I'm going to pull this back out a little bit. We're in kind of tight room here. So what I will do is I'll get the spline in the middle. That'll be glued all the way across. I'm going to have a part of another spline, and hope you can see those marks I've got on the bottom of my breadboard end. So it's kind of hard to see. So what I'm going to have in the middle is going to be ebony spline, and it's going to be proud about 1/8 of an inch. And then there's going to be an ebony plug here. The plug actually covers a screw that holds this part of the breadboard end tight. Keep in mind, I'm only gluing this part of the breadboard end. What had happened in previous years is occasionally I have a little bit of a gap opening up between the breadboard end and the top. So what I'll do is I'll glue a part of a splining here just to keep everything aligned. I'm going to leave a gap here for that screw to go in. Okay. The other thing I will do is I typically sort of take a hand plane and spring this joint, so there's a little bit of maybe like a 64th of a gap between here and this surface. That way when I glue it and clamp it in, I'm going to pull it nice and tight, and this sprung joint will help to keep these ends nice and tight against the top. Then the screw also helps. The problem with just screwing into here, I'm going to be screwing into end grain. Screws don't hold as well into end grain as they do in long grain. Some of the previous pieces I did, like 20 odd years ago, I had a little bit of a gap open up, like I said, between the breadboard end and the top. So what I started doing is modifying this a little bit. And I'm going to move the camera again, and I'm going to pull this top off of here and show you what I'm doing. This is kind of a, I'll come down here and look at this side. So this is kind of a belt and suspenders approach. So I just want to make absolutely sure that these breadboard ends, to the best of my ability, never come off of this top, okay? So again, I said what I'm wind up doing is basically screwing through the breadboard end into the top, and that helps lock the end of the breadboard end in, and then we cover that screw with an ebony plug. So what I've done in order to sort of help that screw hold a little bit tighter, I cut plugs, and these are the plug cutters that I prefer to use. I've had these for, I don't know, 20 odd years. This is a pretty good one, so it's got a cutting spurt here. Then the back of it kind of cleans the rest of the hole out. This one's 5/8. This one I can sharpen. I just recently sharpened it up a little bit, and it was cutting beautifully, giving me nice sort of shavings from that cutting spur. These are the cheaper ones that I bought, and I thought maybe these would be all right. I tried this one for this project, and pretty much after one plug, it just basically burned so much that it wasn't cutting at all. And that's why I went back to sharpening this one and using it again. These I'll use for, I don't know what the heck I'm going to use them for. They're, you know, if I need a small one or something, they might come in handy. But for the most part, for these bigger ones, I'm going to wind up, you rely on this one. I would like to be able to find these things again somewhere, maybe even one with a carbide tip. That would be beautiful. But anyhow, so that's the plug cutter. And this is one instance where I will actually, let me get my Forstner bit. So I cut the plug cutters out of an end grain block. So let me grab that block so you can see what I did. Okay. So again, long grain, end grain, I'm cutting the plugs and that orientation. And obviously I lock this, I got a vise on my drill press that I'll lock this thing into so it doesn't rip out of my hand. And then I drill the holes with a Forstner bit, and what I try to do is go down with the Forstner bit just below where the surface of this slot is. That way the plug has something to lock into in the top of the very top. And this is an instance where I'll actually use my calipers. I want these things to fit fairly tight, so you can see my Forstner bit, we're a little under 5/8 of an inch. We should be at 0.625, so it's 3/1000ths of an inch less than that. So what I want to do is make sure those plugs are pretty close, and you can see my plugs with that plug cutter are dead on at 5/8 of an inch. So what that should mean is as I drill this and then glue this thing in, I should have a nice tight fit. I probably wiggled a little bit because I drilled these by hand, so those holes are going to be a little bit off. So now when I wind up screwing this into it, That screw has some long grain to really bite into, helps hold that end of the breadboard end nice and tight. Since I've been doing it this way, I haven't had a breadboard end actually create a little bit of a gap on that end. Yeah, and again, it's like sort of trying to keep as high a level of craftsmanship as I possibly can. I prefer, not to see that gap. My own furniture, I can probably live with it. Still not happy about it. But if I send this to a client, I sure as heck don't want that gap to open up. So I'll wind up working some more on this. I'll show you how I cut those plugs a little bit later. I need to get another drill bit because the drill bit for these particular plugs I think is dull. So I either need to find a new one. Which right now, since we have a shelter-in-place order, I'm going to be sort of see who's open to be able to go buy that bit. I know Home Depot is, but they're a little bit down the hill from me, so I have to see what other errands I got at some point. I run down there and get it. But I'll show you how I do those plugs. And that's about it for this one. We'll pick it up again a little bit later on. I'll try to work out some more videos for showing you how I go about the rest of this Greene Greene hall table. So, thank you.